It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Kathy Scalzo, who is our keynote speaker. Kathy is the president of Scalzo and Associates here in Vancouver, and they're a consulting group specializing in healthcare and nonprofit. She began her healthcare career as an occupational therapist and has developed rehabilitation programs in acute care, long-term care, and mental health settings. She has obtained a master's degree in organizational development as well, and for the past 20 years has assisted individual groups and organizations initiate, plan for, and adapt to change. Kathy's also co-author of the best-selling book in BC here called Picking Up the Pieces, Moving Forward After Surviving Cancer. So now you understand why we've asked her to join us here today. She was the first chair of the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer, a national survivorship committee whose goal is to develop a framework and strategy to assist survivors all across Canada. Much of Kathy's current work includes assisting cancer support groups and organizations to address the transition and ongoing changes that come after cancer and when the treatment for cancer ends. So Kathy joins us today to give her keynote address called Moving Forward. Kathy Scalzo.
Thank you. Great. Good morning, everyone. What a great day to be alive. Thank you so much, Catherine, for that lovely intro. And it's really a delight for me to be here and have the opportunity. I want to make sure you can hear me. I tend to be a mover, so if you can't hear me, just wave. That you cannot hear? Okay, great. Thank you. What my goal today is to come and share some of my experience working with survivors of many different kinds of cancer across Canada, and looking at the topics that are near and dear to the whole theme you have today of living well. Is this a healthy choice for me? Am I living the life I want to live? A lot of it has to do with, as Deb so articulately said, taking charge of your own health care and moving forward in a way that you want to move. So I'd like to begin this morning by quoting from Alice in Wonderland. When Alice is asked by the caterpillar, "Who are you?" And she says, "I hardly know, sir, just at the present. At least I know who I was this morning when I woke up, but I think things must have changed several times since then." It's certainly been my experience, and I think probably likely yours, that this is not an unfamiliar thing for many of us in our life. And this is not even before cancer enters into it. Because with cancer, as you so well know, comes a whole new set of changes, a whole new set of uncertainties. And yet what I want to remind you of today, that with or without cancer, the constancy of change in our lives is requiring each of us to continually recreate, redefine, adapt, and cope with the unexpected. And then let me just give you a kind of a crazy, it's simple, it's not dramatic example of something that just happened to me this week. But I think if I sat at each of your table and said, this week, what are some of the things that changed in your life? What happened that you didn't think was going to happen? I bet many of us would point to at least 3 or 4 things. But I'm going to go to Tuesday in my life. And it was one of those days where I got up, and I don't know if you have these days, absolutely adamant that I had not slept. I saw 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and then I had to get up. And so I got up with the whole goal of getting back to bed as soon as possible. And so the day was full. And I was still, by about 9:30, I'm thinking, yes, nice herbal tea and a bath. This is great. Going to bed, going to bed, going to bed. And my husband and I have a black lab, 12-year-old black lab. And so one of our routines at night is you put the dog out, right? No big deal. Put the dog out, great. Turning down the heat, doing the rituals. We all have rituals that we do to define our day. And all of a sudden, the dog's back, and he's doing this, shaking his tail and his kind of giving me the symbols he does when he wants to go out. And I'm like, I don't know about you with your dog, but I negotiate with mine. It's like, listen, give me a break. I'm really tired. I've already put you out. Come on. And the dog's, and it's not having any impact at all. So finally I do that. The second best thing I can do is like, okay, you can go out, but for 5 minutes and no barking. Anyway, the dog's, so I open the door. And just then, as the dog goes to skirt by me, the 3 of us go, ah! The dog's like a cartoon. You can see the smoke coming out of the rear of his legs. I have my hand up going like this, and the skunk does what all skunks do, says no in a very different way too. Her tail or his tail goes up, and the three of us are cast in this huge smoke of skunk. 2 hours later, I had a very different kind of bath, as did the dog, as did the door, as did the kitchen, and that's just one day in my life, and probably yours. How many times does that not happen? You're innocently negotiating with your dog, and you open the door, and bam, something you hadn't anticipated happens. So what I want to talk a lot about this morning with you is the whole topic of change. I know you get sick of it. People will stand up here and they say change is the only constant in our life. But because change is the only constant in our life, we have thoughts about change. We have perceptions and connotations and feelings about change. And one of the things that's hard for many of the people that I work with is to grapple with this question, now what, after so many changes? After so many decisions that you have to make and your partner has to make when cancer enters your life, at some point you just get tired of making choices and making decisions and coping with change. Does this make sense to you? You just get tired of it. And so when the next day comes along and you're at a new stage and you need to step forward and take charge of your health, because that's what recovery is all about. Recovery is about moving through change, taking charge of change. So it's not surprising to me that many people talk about having a whole tidal wave of emotions when it comes to change. And it's certainly one of the emotions that people have. It's gratitude to be alive. Thank God I'm here. It's a great day to be alive. But there's also fatigue, and there's frustrations with the side effects, and there's pain. And some days you just feel overwhelmed, and other days you feel frustrated, and then there's the feeling of calm and the feeling of relief, and all these feelings can happen for some of us in such a short period of time. We don't need a whole day. It could be an hour. I remember one survivor chatting with me saying, you know, I feel like I'm on an emotional roller coaster. Some moments I'm riding going up the roller coaster. I'm delighted, I'm grateful, I'm happy to be here. And then I plummet down into sadness and frustration and those kinds of feelings. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about. So one of the important things to look at with change is that change is a paradox. As one thing falls away, often something new steps in to take its place. So the bud becomes the flower. The caterpillar transitions into the butterfly. There's a lot of really positive things that happen with that word change. And yet the challenge is that some of them are positive and some of them not so positive. And one of the experiences I hear over and over from survivors is that it's not until you're faced with adversity that you really know who your true friends are. And so that whole thing of like when you were having your surgery or when you were chatting with people in the early days about your diagnosis, the responses you got, who came forward and who didn't. And one of the things that people have often said to me, it was really interesting. I got so close to my older sister. Or, gee, the neighbor who, you know, we just waved at as we got in and out of the car was the person that was there for me, not my best friend. So those are the kinds of learnings that unfortunately for many of us with the whole cancer diagnosis comes into our life, as well as many other changes. But who is in this paradox has moved forward and into your life, as well as those that have perhaps moved a little bit further back? Interesting things to note and pay attention to. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the whole theory of change, because I think it is so prevalent, and I'm hoping that you leave here with some new thoughts about that word, transition, recovery, moving forward, because that's what is involved with moving forward. I'm going to say it over and over and over. It's about embracing and moving through change. But one of the things that's required to do that is to look at many of us, because change has been overwhelming. Our first reaction is to ignore it or to hope it goes away, because we have this perspective of either or. We look at change from the vantage point of, does it help me? Does it move me forward towards something that's pleasant, that I want to do, a goal, a direction that I already am, it is something that makes sense to me? Or is it going to hinder me? Is it going to get in the way? Is it going to cause me frustration and stress? I don't want that kind of change. I only want the good kind of change. So we tend to make judgments about change. The other thing that happens with that is other people make judgments about change. And they make judgments about the changes you may want to make. So an example I have recently in my life is my 87-year-old father told his family that he'd like to remarry again. His 85-year-old girlfriend and he are willing to do this, and they like the children's blessing. Now, I'm the eldest of 9 in an Italian family. It means 8 siblings have got to agree on this platform. I'm like, Dad, I don't think you want anybody's permission if this is what you want to do. But I need to tell you, boy, was my family on this scale divided on whether this was a good or a bad change. Interesting, something that was going to give this man partnership, happiness. My mother had been dead for many years. What? If not now, when? If not now, when? And who were we, his children, to decide? Tell that to my youngest sister. Anyway, so I'd like to give you a different perspective on change. I'm sorry, I keep moving away from the mic because I want to move into you. So if you can't hear me, please let me know. So instead of just the either-or perspective on change, I'd like to give you one that's a little bit more of a grid, and it looks at how voluntary and predictable are the changes in your life. And we're certainly hoping that today you'll embrace a healing plan and move into taking, at least as Deb said, charge of one thing in your life that'll help you live well, live in the way that you want to live, and make healthy choices for you. So if we go to this grid, if you look at some changes are voluntary, but they might not necessarily be, well, let's look down here in the corner, voluntary and predictable. So at my age, a lot of my friends are downsizing. Okay, they've decided it's time to sell the family home. They picked out a townhouse or a condo. It's predictable. They're going to give up this house, and they're going to go to that house. Now, we all know there's lots of stuff going on in between those, but there's a bit of predictable voluntariness about that change. Go up to the next quadrant, predictable but involuntary. Your crown falls out. Your filling falls out. It's predictable you're going to the dentist, but it may not be so voluntary because you're not so happy about what it is that you have to do. Down here to voluntary and unpredictable. I think they call it marriage. Okay? You're signing up for it, but you have no idea what you're really getting in for. And at the very top in the yellow sits cancer. Involuntary and unpredictable. And I'm bringing that up because what I want you to get a sense of when we use this crazy word change, they're not all alike. And it has a lot to do with how predictable and how voluntary they are. Because whether or not you had cancer, a lot of things were going to change in your life that are predictable in the normal aging process. We knew that little kids eventually will hit the stage where they're going to not be at home, they're going to school. And for the next 18 years, they're going to be called a student. We know that at some point, that student is going to leave home and hopefully become a worker and get a job, unless, according to the commercial, you're serving too much cheese at home. Is that what they say? Have you seen that commercial? Don't serve them cheese, they stick around. Anyway, there's predictability in our life, and there's unpredictability that we don't know when it's going to happen, but we know it is going to happen. I know my 12-year-old dog is going to die, and I'm going to be really sad about that. I know my 15-year-old car is going to die, and I'm going to be even sadder. Well, maybe not even sadder, but I'm going to be sad about that too. We have some predictable changes that are part of normal life. Now, here comes cancer. And with that comes a lot of unpredictable and involuntary changes. So one of the things I think it's really important to acknowledge is that when many people talk about life before cancer and life after cancer, as if it's a continuous line. But in the middle, where you see I put cancer diagnosis, there's a thin bar. And on that bar sits a world of changes, because on that bar begins the word transition. Transition. And as we transition, many different things start to happen. The father of transition was William Bridges, and he created this graph where he says, something happens, change happens all the time. And hopefully Some are good, as we talked about, and perhaps some are not so good. But transition begins when a change comes along that stops a certain chapter of your life. So the way you've been living stops, and a new beginning is waiting in the wings. But it's not here yet. It's not here yet. You only know what you don't have. You're not quite sure what's coming. Or you know what you don't want, but you're not sure what you do want. And in the middle is something he calls the neutral zone. I find the neutral zone far too gentle a term for what to me looks like this. This is transition. You have lost the bar, the anchor that has held you to your life. You used to be this person, Mary Jane, Ted, Jack, worker, husband. We'll talk about the roles that change with transition. Now, cancer's come into your life. It's changed things. And so what was is somewhat the same, but it's a lot different, and you find yourself in what we call free fall, or the void, or this neutral zone where you've dropped the bar, but you haven't yet grabbed the next one. Does anybody know what that feels like? That whole transition time? Well, one of the things that makes transition very difficult, and people don't talk about this too much, is there are anchors that hold us in the face of the winds of change that come along normally without cancer, that are dramatically impacted by a diagnosis of cancer. The first one is every one of us walked in here today with roles. Now, we don't have little ones on that tell you that, you're a daughter, a niece, a nephew, a sister, a dad, a member of the Knights of Columbus, Rotary. I have no idea all the roles you have. But what I do know is when you are in transition, many people can no longer fulfill those roles like they used to. And when you have come through a cancer experience, many people stop and try and assess, is this a role I still want? I.e., could be whether or not you want to go back to work, or they look at, do I want to define my role differently, or has the side effects of my cancer required me to do this role differently? And I'm thinking very specifically of a grandmother that I worked with who was so upset because she, because of her treatment, could no longer pick up her a bit chunky 18-month-old grandson. And she's like, what kind of a grandmother can't pick up her grandson? And she was distraught. And I'm saying, Mary Ann, we just need to define grandmother different. You need to, spend some time with your grandson and say, you and grandma are going to develop a special kind of hug that's only yours and mine. I can't pick you up like everybody else can, but we're going to have something very special to us. It's taking what was and shifting it around in a positive way so it works for you, given the limitations that may come with your illness. And at first she was kind of resistant, and then she became delighted because it did become something very special between her and her grandson. And he would say, only Nana and I do that. And I think I think there's a message for all of us. And how do we want to define our roles as they change after treatment? Routines. The other thing that are often interrupted when you're in transition, especially a post-cancer treatment, recovery, survivorship. I interchange those words because I know the side effects for the illness is different for everybody in this room. Many people have a routine of they grab a coffee and they read the paper, or like I was saying before, you walk your dog. You have things that you just do. You don't think about them, you just do. But again, post-treatment, not so easy. Not the same. Need to make some changes. Breakfast might have been a time you look forward to. Now, due to changing in appetite, changing your mouth, changing your taste, all those kinds of things that you know about, a routine that gave you structure now becomes something that you don't look forward to. Relationships. Again, similar to roles, we're all part of so many groups. Family groups, work groups, kidney cancer, I hope. Kidney Cancer Canada, that is. And those groups give meaning to our lives. We desperately reach out to our friends in time of need. We want to be the people they reach out to when they have need. And yet, who and what you give your time to is how you live your life. And I want to talk a little bit later. Not all people are healthy choices for you. Some people are what we call energy vampires. They suck the energy right out of you. You need to make wise choices around relationships. And last but not least, the fourth area affected in times of transitions are one's beliefs and assumptions. I'm not sure about you, but I've had many people tell me it wasn't until they had their diagnosis of cancer that they really had to face their belief. Can I be well again once I've had cancer? Is wellness a word that's living well? Are those words I can use? And a lot of it goes back to your beliefs and the stories we were told as young children. Again, in some families, if you're sick, oh, sweetie, you go to bed and we'll bring you a cup of soup and now you just stay in bed and get better. Other families, suck it up and get on the school bus, you know. So it depends a lot on how illness was viewed in your family, where we started to develop our own ideas and beliefs about illness. And also people with cancer. When you were young, how were people with cancer, how did they live, how were they treated? And over time, the people that you know in your life that have said to you, I have cancer, how have you seen what was their quality of life like? And have you made beliefs or assumptions for yourself based on what other people's experience was? It's an interesting thing to think about. And if we had more time, I would challenge you to say, what were some of the words or phrases you grew up with? Because those, again, give us key notes into our beliefs. So I told you I grew up in an Italian family. Very key message from my mother. We don't share our dirty laundry. We don't talk about problems outside the familia. You know, you guys have seen The Sopranos, you know. So, I mean, that sounds great. Sounds all very fine. Well, let me tell you, there are problems in the family. And even when you leave that family, if you need help, hard to ask. Hard to ask. So again, it might be something to think about or talk with your partner later. What were some of the little messages you grew up with that may be impacting some of your beliefs as you move forward in your own recovery? So I do want to ask you, and again, we're not going to have time to talk about them, but I do want to ask you to think about, back to this word beliefs, what are your definitions of these very key words that we're talking about in this whole concept of living well? What does the word healing mean to you? Do you believe you can heal? What about recovery? What does that mean to you? And living well, what does that look like? You know, not just a definition, but look like. I'll tell you what I think recovery is. I think it's a process. I don't think it's something that just happens. I think it takes time, over time, and it very definitely involves moving through change. Depends on the number of changes you have, how willing and able you are to address the now what question about am I willing to step forward and identify just one more change that I want to make? But in a way, that's the heart of recovery, taking charge of those changes. And a lot about recovery in survivorship, I have found as I've spent, I told you, the last 10 years working with different people in developing survivorship care plans, survivorship support programs, is can you shift your concept of illness, because that's unfortunately when we get the diagnosis of patient, and then even from person to patient, patient to cancer patient, patient to all these different labels we get, within each of them, there are shifting focuses and transitions. And can you shift from thinking about yourself in the terms of being ill to thinking about yourself in terms of wellness? I'm as well as I can be, or, you know, I'm not as well as I could be, but there's something I can do about that, and I'm going to get on it. I'm going to create a healing plan for me. What I'd like to do is just take a minute, and this is not a pitch for this book, but what I'm introducing to you now is the 4-phase process of recovery that Dr. Sherry McGee and I developed 6 years ago after interviewing and working with over 200 survivors of different kinds of cancer. And we asked them, if someone had sat down with you after your surgery, after the last day of treatment, and said to you, you know, this is what will help you recover, What would you have liked to have had in that recovery plan? What would you have liked to have had on your, if there is such a thing as a last day of treatment? And people said, you know what I would like to have had? I would have liked to have had just the first step of what to do on Tuesday at 3 o'clock. I'd like to know where to begin, how to answer the now what question. Just one step. Then maybe I can maybe figure out the rest, but if I was really lucky, having step maybe 2, 3, 4 would help too. So what we did is we listened to what people told us, and we came up with a 4-phase process of recovery that starts and ends with you. The first place is recovering a sense of post-cancer diagnosis. Who are you? Who are you now? What's changed? But what's not changed? There's a core you still in there, minus one kidney, I hear in some cases. But there's a core you still there. How has that person been changed by the experience of cancer? And how is that person still the same? We'll talk a little more about that. The second is recovering a sense of control. After so much of your life being kind of changed by structured doctor's appointment and doing what's convenient for members of the healthcare team, where do you now start to do what's convenient for you? And what are the choices that you can start to take control of? Is this a healthy choice for me? You may have to ask yourself often when you make choices about people, where you give your time, and who you give it to. The third is recovering a sense of meaning. Were there experiences in your cancer journey that you actually learned more about the strengths that are within you, the insights, things that you didn't know about until this adversity came along? And now that you've had it, man, you're clear. You know what your priorities are. You know what your strengths are. You've faced down cancer. You're different. You're the same, but you're different. And last but not least, recovering a sense of the future. And that might sound like a crazy one, but one of the things that I've learned, and probably you have too, that when you're in the cancer world, it's all about live for today, right? Today, 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 today. Well, welcome back to the reality of living in the real world. The real world is about planning for tomorrow. So whether you're going to put money in your RSP or not, whether you're going to go on a vacation, whether you're going to do a lot of things, you need to plan for that. And for people that have been in the whole cancer experience, sometimes that's hard. You know, that's hard to kind of move out of, I only know I've got today, and you're asking me to go into the future, and the future's kind of a scary, uncertain place. But it's important to be able to take back an aspect of the future. So let's start recovering with a sense of self. And a couple of key questions I'd like you to take away and think about is, what's normal now for you? Crazy word, normal. Don't even know if it really exists anymore. But what's changed and what's stayed the same is something I've already mentioned to you. And in the book, but this is something you can do for yourself, we've used the metaphor picking up the pieces. And because I think a lot of people post-cancer see themselves like a jigsaw puzzle. It's like somebody took you, dropped you on the ground, and you broke up into about 1,000 different pieces. There's still you in those pieces, but they're kind of jingle-jangled around. So if you think of a jigsaw puzzle, where do you start? Edges, 4 corners, exactly. God, you guys are smart. So you find the 4 corners, which I'm promoting is your physical self, your emotional self, your spiritual self, your social relationships, and you start to frame in and build your life from there. So it begins with an inquiry, a true fact-finding mission about what's the same, what's different, and the challenge about that inquiry, as this sort of graphic shows, is that one of the challenges I find with working with survivors is that because so much of the external looks the same, it's hard for people to really grasp how much has changed internally. And I think one of the women I worked with said it the best. She said, Kathy, I live in the same house, am married to the same man, drive the same car, and have the same pets. But I'm different. I'm different post-cancer, but all my friends see the same old Irene. Does that make sense to you? So somehow we have to take charge of our own change, because if we look to other people, not going to happen. So taking charge of change begins with a self-assessment, starting, like I said, with the corner of the body, and looking at, for you, what have been the side effects that have changed and affected your life post-cancer? Could be sleep, could be, my experience is certainly energy management that people struggle with around the fatigue and activity level. What are the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that are changing in your life because of this adversity? How are you dealing with the losses that have happened? And there are losses. And I think one of the things as I talk about moving through change, back to that grid of are some changes good and some are bad? You bet. Of course they are. And the things that are important in life take time. And when they change, we need to grieve that and take the time for that. But simultaneously, what gives you comfort? What brings you hope? What gives you moments of inspiration and awe? Can you answer those questions? And last but not least, what are the roles in your life that you want to change? What are the expectations that you have for yourself versus the expectations of others? And are you getting the support that you need? It's so wonderful to see caregivers here because I think a lot of this relates to you. When you are giving support to someone else, these are the same questions you need to ask yourself. How are you changing? What kind of support are you getting? How's your appetite, your sleep level? What are the thoughts and emotions that are going through for you? Because you need support too. So I want to acknowledge the great contribution you are making for your loved one and encourage you to think about some of these things for yourself. The second is recovering a sense of control, and that is exactly what Deb was saying. What's the one thing you can do starting today that will take you closer to your definition of living well and living the life you want to live? And again, if we had more time, I'd be talking about tools such as how do you deal with fear, because it's real. But one of the things I will talk a little bit more about is developing a healing plan. And that any of these things that we're talking about today really puts the onus, unfortunately, right back on us to take charge of our life. We control with our choices. That's all we got. Which choice do you make at any given moment? So I want to present to you the idea that what motivates those choices? What's the impetus, the energy behind when you're, like in the last slide, you're staring at the apple and you're staring at the donut and like, which one? It depends on whether you're motivated by fear or you're motivated by purpose. And they both have a place. I need to say this very clearly. Fear is often the thing that gets us off the couch and gets us going because you know what you don't want. I don't want to sit here for the rest of my life. It's not the way it's going to be for me. I can do better. But the thing that's important to know about fear is that it recedes over time. You can only stay scared so long. And then after a while, that goes to kind of a dull norm. But purpose, reaching for something, having a vision or goal of something you want. I want to feel stronger. I want to be able to walk 2 miles, 2 blocks. Doesn't matter what your goal is. I want to be able to get through grocery shopping without having to lean on the cart for 5 minutes for energy. Doesn't matter what your goal is. Have you got one? And is it purpose that drives you forward? Especially on rainy, cold days in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. Recovery is about plan change. It is about having a plan. And in order to begin, people, again, I want to keep coming back to this now what question. I ask people to look at their life and I ask things like, what do you love and what do you loathe? And if you think again about last week, what filled your energy? What did you find yourself going, yippee, I can hardly wait? And what did you find yourself saying, oh, I just got to get through it? To try and identify energy drainers and energy builders in a way that you can build on the builders is a very important concept. The challenge is that people in our life, as I've already said, are energy drainers and energy builders. And sometimes they're the same person. The same person that builds our energy can also be the very person that has the most power to take it away. So these are just things to think about. There are people in my life I know that are very much like what do I want to say? I don't want to diagnose them, but I think in the old days we would call it manic depressive. Maybe they call it borderline. I don't know. I got lots of diagnoses I could give them. But I'm finding that I'm spending less and less time with them as I take charge of, is this a healthy choice for me? A friend of mine answers the phone and says, what's your problem? It's the strangest phone reaction I've ever had from somebody. Hi, what's your problem? And I've asked her over and over again, what's wrong with just the hi? Why, what's the problem? She said, well, somebody wouldn't be calling me if there wasn't something that they needed or wanted. I'm like, what? If I needed or wanted something, you were the last. No, I don't say that. Anyway, are you with me with energy drainers and energy builders? Really assess those people in your life. We have got such little time to give to the outside world, so pick the builders and get rid of the drainers, or at least minimize your time, given that one of them might be your sister or your mother or your son. Oh, it's true. And I keep stressing and coming back to choosing choices, but do you have a picture? This is the one thing I work a lot with people, because if you don't know where you're going on a trip, at one level it doesn't matter, but again, you have to have some sort of a sense of, is it on this continent? Is it on another one? Are you using a car? Are you taking a plane? There's some structure you have to give recovery. It doesn't just happen. And it begins with, what do you want? What does wellness look like for you? Can you see it? If you close your eyes and you see yourself striding on a beach, do you see yourself riding a bike? Like, I don't know. I don't know what it is for you. But you need a picture. You need something you could see, again, to keep you going forward. Because change often looks like this. You may feel like the square today, or maybe you feel like the circle. I don't know. But either way, it's baby steps sometimes to get from A to B. And we need a plan. Let me tell you 4 approaches to healing that most survivors I work with fall into, one, the other, or a mixture of them. The first is physical. People say, okay, the one thing like Deb was challenging you this morning, I can do for myself. How am I doing on time? Good, okay. I could do something physical. I'm going to take on that component. I'm going to look at my energy management. I'm going to look at, do I get enough sleep? I'm going to look at how I balance sleep during my day. I know I get really tired around 2:30, so I'm going to make sure I'm home, take a rest, or I'm going to make sure I pull my car over and I just sit. Whatever it is, you have a plan using physical energy as your purpose or vision or goal. The second is, I've been so gifted by the number of people when I told them I had cancer that came forward for me. And the other thing I want to say to you is that some people have told me, cancer wasn't the worst thing that happened to me. While I had cancer, I lost my child. Or while I had cancer, other things happen. Life gets in the way, right? And how do we stay connected to the important people, those non-energy vampires? And maybe the person that you've lost connection to is yourself. Maybe you need a little more reflective time. Or maybe the divine. Maybe you feel your faith has been tested and you want to do something new and different about that. Connection with yourself or others. Creative. A lot of people have said to me, for years I worked at the Bay. I gave it my best. But if I'm ever going to write that novel, paint that picture, or have the garden that I'm proud of because I want to be on the gardening tool, vision of living well, today's the day. So people step into a creative side that perhaps has not been acknowledged. And last but not least, another way back to healing is through giving back, through volunteering in any way, shape, or form, whether that's taking care of a grandchild, taking part in a walk for fundraising. There's thousands of ways people can give back. And it might be something that is, for you, the most advantageous approach to recovery and healing. But a lot of this has to do with what your intention is. And you can see the squirrel is very committed to what his intention is. And I almost need people to understand that intention is an important thing to be clear about. So when you are thinking about that 1-2 things that you want to do to recover, to move yourself forward, I don't use the word goal because we all make resolutions and goals. I'm asking you, what's your intention? Is your intention to heal, to recover, to live well, to live the best life I can? I don't know what it is, but if you could pick it, then what's the action that you would put next to that? Think about it. Creating a healing plan begins with a clear intention. First a picture, then a clear intention, and last but not least, an action. I want to just end with a couple thoughts about experience, because I know you have faced adversity in this room. And Aldous Huxley says, experience is not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you. And I think one of the things that's important to to understand is there are strengths. There are positive things that comes out of the adversity of cancer. I've had person after person say to me, I am so much clearer about what's important for me in my life. I am so much more compassionate now than I ever was. I know what it's like to hurt. I know what it's like to have something surprise me. And last but not least, people have said, you know, I have an enhanced awareness of spirituality, however you define that, because I think I've come close to facing my mortality and what a different place that is to be. I mentioned recovering a sense of the future. And finally, it's putting it all together. Old me, new me, who the heck are you now that you've been through this experience? I think you're a little bit of both. I think you've been changed by it, but there's a core you still in there. And how do you let that old me, new me out together? So there are some anchors in the winds of change I would like to leave you with. The first is to be clear about the changes in your life. How much choice do you have? Where were they voluntary? Where were they not? And where are the changes that you want to pick and choose? To take the time to grieve losses. They're real. And it takes time to make relationships. It takes time to grieve the loss of them. And we are all losing people around us all the time. Discover possibilities. Living well is about moving through change. What's the one change you want to make for you? Recognize and build on the strengths that have come through this experience. And last but not least, please, have a vision of living well and create a plan. I want to end with Proust that says, the real act of discovery lies not finding new lands, but seeing with new eyes. I hope today that our little bit of time together, you're kind of seeing the topic change, transition, recovery, and a vision for living well with new eyes. Godspeed. Thank you.